Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much for joining us for tonight's edition of HR Mentorship Learning Series. My name is Oluyemi Adeosun, and tonight we are looking at the topic HR policies in fragile and donor-funded contexts. And we have gotten one of our regular facilitators, Oluwalola Grace Abraham, who is going to be taking us through tonight's session. Grace Oluwalola is the co-founder of Talent Expert Solutions, a people development organization providing employability support to teach tech and non-tech across Africa. And she is also the managing director of Lorach Consulting, with over 20 years of experience spanning people management, project and business strategy, learning and development, and of course, leadership. She has successfully led initiatives that have driven market growth and organizational transformation across diverse sectors and cultures. Beyond her profession, involved in girl-child development initiatives, mentoring young girls, and connecting them to growth opportunities, particularly in technology. She firmly believes that employability is attainable for everyone with the right passionately upholds. Ladies and gentlemen, speaking to us tonight on the topic HR policies in fragile and donor-funded context, let's welcome Grace Oluwalola. You have the floor, ma'am.
Thank you very much, Ogami, for that wonderful introduction. Good evening, everyone. It's a beautiful day. Number one, I need you to please confirm you can hear me loud and clear before I start.
Yes, we can.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for this opportunity. I don't take it for granted. Good evening, everyone. It's good to be back here again. And we'll be talking about a very interesting topic, especially for those working in donor-funded environment. I'm sure they will find this very interesting. I'm going to start this session by telling a story. Ayo, not real name, but a real life situation. Ayo was an HR person, and she was a HR leader in our organization, and she had worked on several projects, part of which was outreaches, doing a lot of programs for the organization, some of them CSR activities. And then at a point, the organization thought about it. Why not start a foundation? And then they did all this, and Ayo was promoted to lead the foundation because Ayo had performed very well. Even though she was an HR person, she had performed in some of the initiatives, some of the CSR initiatives of the organization he or she was working in. But something happened when Ayo took over. Ayo was given a burden of bringing in some very large target. So it's a case of we're starting this, and this is your target for the next 1 year, even though the organization was just started. And Ayo struggled. And we know for a donor-funded organization, it's you're depending on other people. If they don't give you money, certainly you can't have money. So Ayo struggled, and unfortunately, Ayo couldn't bring in any money. The projects, Ayo had some very fantastic ideas, and she had put a lot of them to paper. But because she couldn't get funding, after a while, the hard meeting that happens with HR and the organizations happened. And Ayo was termed or judged as not performing based on the target that she's been given. And of course, she was shown the way out. Now, this situation might look like, oh, did she perform or not perform? While we're not dwelling on performance, we're talking about the fact that a donor-funded work environment can be a volatile one. It can be an non-guarantee of work, and anything can happen. So welcome to VUCA, welcome to Fragility, and welcome to donor-funded work environment. I hope we have a good time today. My name is Grace Oluwalola, as Ogami has mentioned. I will be talking to us on practical guidance for us as HR people, for those who work in programs, I've worked in HR, I've worked in programs, and of course, for those who may be working in fragile or do not funded projects, not necessarily as HR, but of course, we're talking to HR. So I'm going to put a lot of emphasis on being HR in this kind of environment. Now, the question is, what is a fragile or donor funded environment? For those who are here, I want to quickly do an exercise. Is anyone here on this call currently working in a donor, or I don't know, this person is asking for requesting to record on their computer. Okay. So is there anyone here present at the moment working in a donor-funded organization? If you are, can you please raise your hand? We want to know if there's someone working currently, either in HR or any other position. And is anyone here working in a donor environment? Anyone?
I run a non-governmental organization. My name is Ronke.
Oh, Aderonke, thank you very much for joining. I know Aderonke, thank you for joining. And she's worked a lot. I'm sure you, in the course of this, I'll bring you up to actually share some of your experience, Ronke. Thank you very much for joining us. So, working in a place where you don't have control, I always see it as not having control, because it's money that makes life go around sometimes. So you might have all the policies, all the initiatives, everything is looking good on the papers. If the donor companies, or if the organization that will give you money, if anything happens, then so many things will have to happen. An example is early this year, and a lot of people who are in this ecosystem will agree with me. When Mr. Trump took over this year, so many organizations that have their funding from the US suffered some setbacks in their funding, and it affected a couple of companies. And I know organizations where they had to downsize. These are the things that we're going to be looking at. So it's good to be an HR, but when you have to work on a very tight budget, where you have to work in a place where tomorrow is not guaranteed, how do we handle it? So that's what we're going to be talking about this evening. Thank you very much for joining us. Right, so go to the next. Don't disappoint yourself. Okay, so our learning objective will be understanding in this context. I think I've even mentioned that already. We'll identify the core policies that is required or that is needed to work as HR, or that we have to put in place. Maybe it's just starting and you're going to be starting with them. We'll identify the core policies that we should put in place as human resources people. And then we'll learn how to align compliance with the donor requirements. Very, very important, because one of the things that is very key in a donor environment, a donor or funded project environment, is that the compliance is a lot required. So yeah, there are too many reports, so many reports that you have to do from time to time, and you must. So compliance is key, and of course, most times that comes from the HR in the house. You have to make sure that people are complying with the policies, they're complying with reporting, they're complying with everything. Very important. Of course, we'll look at a few templates or real examples that will guide us, just to drive home the point that yes, we can work in this and we can still thrive while we're doing it, no matter how difficult it can be, while making sure that we don't burn out as HR, and making sure that we're supporting our people effectively. So let's go on. So what makes this context unique? Why are we looking at this topic, or what is the unique? What is unique about a fragile or donor-funded environment? Most times it's project-based. We all know what project is. Project is an endeavor that has a timeline. So it might be 2 years, it might be 10 years, but at least you know from when you're starting that it's going to end. It's not like a program that is ongoing. So most donor programs, they are projects. So the project is, this is what this is to do. maybe reach 2,000 girls in Taraba State, give them sex education, and then do this for 1 year. And this is the result that we're expecting afterwards. And then you get the brief. This is the budget. Budget is agreed. Then you begin to think of, okay, how do we get people who have the knowledge to run this project, the programs under the project, and then who are the people that can do the back end, the front end, the travel, the non-travel, the office work, and everything. Very, very important. So what makes this content, why are we doing this? Why is this unique? Number one, we're going to be looking at fragile. Why do we say it's fragile? We all know what it means for something to be fragile. A glass cup, for example, is fragile. And when we're traveling with something that can easily break, we usually will put it there, maybe like a fragile. When you see a package that has fragile, that tells us is this can break anytime. The same thing. So the question is, why would you say a work environment can break anytime, or is fragile, or is because it can be unstable, because it's dependent on other variables. And the major variable in this is the person that is putting the money down for the project. I'll share a personal experience. So I joined a CBO. The CBO is community-based organization in 2020 as a programs person, as the program manager. And it was Action Aid project for 5 years. So we started the first year. We were put on a particular amount for our interventions, and we're doing it. But the second year, the money was reduced a bit from Canada. So it's a project between Action Aid and Global Affairs Canada. There was a review of the amount for the project to CBOs. It was reduced further. And by the time we're getting to the fourth year, the money was no longer even getting to anything. And with the rate of inflation, but we still had to do what we had to do. So what we decided doing was, okay, what part of our interventions can we not do? What can we do? Don't forget, and because every year you write the concept notes. These are the things you want to do this year. These are the things you want to do this quarter. This is the thing we want to do this month. But because we will not go and use our money to do it, we don't even have the money. We depend on them for everything. So we had to start saying, okay, we're not buying office equipment, certainly, because that's been sorted the first year. But we had to make sure that, okay, what else can we do? And we had to start building on what we have done before. That was the only way we could scale, because by the time we're getting to the fourth year, we were receiving less than half of what we started with. So, and that explains the fact that it's not stable. It's not stable, and that's why we're dealing with this. Okay, well, how do you handle when you're not sure of getting the fund coming, when you're not sure? Anything can happen. The donor organization may have good intentions, but like the example I gave earlier, US happened to so many donor organizations in Nigeria, and some of them had to cut down on their staff. So if you were HR in that kind of environment, how do we handle it? How do we ensure that they don't wait for us at the bus stop with the beating of our lives? It's very important. So it's fragile, it's unstable, there's conflict, there's weak governance, and of course, there's need for higher protection and safety needs. We'll get to that as we go on. And then when we talk about donor-funded projects, I already mentioned that earlier. It's coming from abroad, it's coming from other people, not necessarily that we're generating anything from internal. And when you look at, so here we call them NGOs, we call them charity, or they call it NGO in Nigeria. When we look at all this that we're doing, we're relying 100% on what comes from external funders, either governments or non-government. And when it's like that, the person that dictates the tune is the person that is paying the piper. So the organization we are working in may be the pipers, and then the person dictating the tune might be in Canada, in US, or anywhere in the world. And number one, they have their reason for putting their money down. That reason must first be fulfilled before our own needs must be fulfilled. And that has to be, of course, what will be in the first front burner for all our processes and for all the things we're doing. So because it's donor funded, of course, we're expecting money from the other side. And then the compliance requirements are usually a lot. So it's different from our regular day-to-day HR. So if you work in manufacturing, for example, maybe the compliance you'll be looking at will be okay, safety, health and safety, your food standard or whatever, and everything. And maybe if you have problem with people with maybe high staff turnover, that may be the problem. But it's that when you put one chemical and the other chemical, when you look at it, and then there's the texture that it must have, and then it passes through this machine, you're sure that this is the result. That's a bit more straightforward than when, okay, you don't even know if what you're bringing to the table will be approved or it will not be approved. And of course, one of the things that why we're looking at it is because it's donor funded, it's usually will have short funding cycles. I mentioned earlier that the project I was involved in was a 5-year cycle, and even though it was 5-year cycle, at the time we're starting, we're not told that they're going to start cutting, but eventually they started cutting. But we couldn't opt out. We couldn't opt out because we were looking at the possibility of getting other opportunities. So we had to, what they will say, cut hand, cut leg, make sure that we are still relevant. And of course, while we're making sure that we're also not drowning while we're doing that. So what are those things that are very, very common? The short funding cycle, I mentioned that. And when there's short funding cycle, what that tells us is staff job security might not be easy it might not be easy to have job security. So staffing uncertainty is a lot possible, and it's something that will always happen, that will likely happen in this kind of environment. Because if a donor decides to cut off, say for example, you're working on a Bill Gates $20 million project, and Bill Gates just feels maybe somebody abused him on Twitter, and he says, today I'm stopping, I don't want to do anything in Nigeria anymore, and he cuts that down. You're not going to go look for money or go sell kidney to continue that project. You have to come back inside and say, okay, guys, unfortunately, Mr. Gates has said we should go home. So we wish you all the best. The best we can do is to give you reference, and then everybody goes. So because it's short funding cycle, there's a lot of issues. So we're not going to just dwell on the issues, but we're saying, oh, we understand that when you work in this kind of environment, where you manage people resources in this kind of environment, it stretches you a bit more than it will stretch you in other climes. But making sure that while we're doing this, we're human, not just human resources, we're human first, and then we're putting humanity to our resources management, and then we're supporting people, and we're supporting our mental health too. Very, very important. So another thing is, of course, I mentioned this earlier, compliance, heavy operations. There's a lot of compliance issue. You must comply with this, you must comply with that. And of course, multicultural workforce. Sometimes some of these organizations, especially when it's the international one, the ratio is always there, the number of local hires versus the number of foreign hires. So we'll be working within a